I'm Jamie Seeker, and this is What It Takes. Each episode, I sit down with real business owners to talk about their journey, the wins, the challenges, and everything in between. Let's dive in. Hey everyone, welcome back to What It Takes, the podcast where we get real with business owners about their journeys, the wins, the losses, and everything in between. Today's guest is Randy Lorensen, and I'm genuinely excited for this one. Randy's the founder and CEO of Premium Cabinets, and they have over 30 locations across the US. His business is not just about beautiful kitchens, it's about building opportunities for other entrepreneurs to step into ownership. So that's just like a little part of their story, though. Randy also is an author and podcast host who's deeply passionate about financial literacy and abundance. And his upcoming book, Demystifying Money, is all about changing the way we think about money, something he believes unlock real freedom. So if you've ever felt stuck or overwhelmed when it comes to finances, or you're a business owner trying to get a grip on your money mindset, this conversation is going to hit home. So Randy, welcome to What It Takes. We're so glad you're here.
Thanks for having me. I don't know what I have to add after that intro. I think you
That's
did the whole thing.
that's the goal. That's the goal. So let's just start at the beginning then. What inspired you to launch Premium Cabinets, and how did you grow it into this nationwide business with 30 locations?
That's actually an interesting story. So I had a white collar background. I actually moved from Minnesota to Austin, Texas during the dotcom boom and then subsequent bust in 99, 2000. And I actually had a history of being early to a lot of things, and we don't have to, but I had three or four things where I was just in the business, including like that and the energy efficiency business, where I was in the right business, but I kind of saw the opportunity before other people did, and before sometimes being early is worse than being late, is what I learned. But I call this kind of my backpacking Europe phase, but I played poker for a living for 8 years. And it wasn't part of the plan. I just started playing and I won. And all of a sudden, it was kind of a cool thing to do for a while. But at some point, I wanted to go back to being a productive member of society again. And, you know, poker was fine and I traveled and did things, but I wasn't really, I wasn't doing anything for the world. And when I first started playing poker, people would call me and they would say, "Hey, I got this opportunity and I got this job offer, and here you should check out this business." And when you say no to people over and over and over again for 8 years, they kind of quit calling, right? They kind of forget about you. So at the end, I started thinking, boy, I need something. And a friend of mine called me about the cabinet business. I was like, I don't know anything about cabinets. I'm not handy. I don't know. But anyway, he told me about it. I flew up to a manufacturer to check them out. And I did a bunch of research and I was like, I can do it. There's great margins in cabinets. There's a big enough learning curve that not just anybody can do it. It's much harder than, if you measure a wall in the cabinet business and it's 102, if you measure it at 120 inches and it's actually 119 and 3/4, the cabinets won't fit, right? With flooring or paint or a lot of things, they just expect waste and they work that in. So I learned the business and I dug in, and my honest plan was I was going to build this business for a year or two while I figured out what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. And then I intended to either hire somebody to run it or sell the business at that point. And once I got into it, I found out I really liked it. I enjoyed working with the customers, helping people design their kitchen. And when I started, if anything terrified me, it was design. I thought, I'm not a designer. How am I going to do this? But once I got into design, I found out there was more math and geometry in cabinet design than there is what people think of in design. And even more than that, it was, how do I help this person get the kitchen they want, whether it's the most beautiful kitchen they can imagine, the most functional kitchen they can imagine, the price, they want their trash over here, they want their silverware over there, whatever those problems was. I actually got in and really started enjoying that process. And from there, I told, like, my friend Gary was in Tulsa, and who's now my partner in the business. And I told him about the business, and then he told his cousin in Oklahoma City, and I told another friend in LA, and he told somebody in Chicago, and we just grew that way. Now we have 35 locations and still growing. And I'm I'm not really built for running the day-to-day business that much for a like I would ever really I envy people that can do that for 30 or 40 years. I really do, doing the same thing over and over. I just need new challenges and new things. So what I did because of all these people, I created systems. And initially it was just to help them. And eventually we figured out there was a national company there. But I started documenting, systematizing, and figuring out just exactly like, here's how you get the phone to ring. And this is the marketing plan. And this you run this ad with these pictures, with this verbiage, and constantly testing and trying new things, and really became excellent at marketing. And then, the sales process. I took classes and I studied and I recorded my presentation over and over and over again and going, my God, I would say things and be like, why would I? I hated recording my presentation. I just I hated it. And I would say things and go, my God, why would you say it? The customer asked this and you did that? But I did it at least once a week and I got better. And then I took like a Sandler selling system class and applied that to the sales presentation and created the systems. And eventually, now we've got our own custom software that we use for we call it a CRM, but it's a lot more. It's places orders, it can handle shipping, it can handle warranties, it does a lot of stuff. So really now we have the 35 independent dealers, of which I'm actually not even one of them anymore. I was till a few years ago, but now I just run the national company and really just we try to bring quality people on board. We're looking for new dealers and then we give them, they're independent dealers. It's a licensing agreement, but we offer systems very much like a franchise and here's how to do everything along the process. And then we offer the training, the support, and help with their marketing and software and all kinds of different things. So that's a whole mouthful and a good overview of where we started and how we got there, I guess.
Yeah, no, and I find that so interesting because you're one of the very few stories that typically what I talk to or what in my experience what I see is somebody is already in the profession, they make cabinets already and they decide to kind of veer off onto their own or they are, whatever XYZ fill in the blank of whatever that particular industry is or their trade or services that they offer. But you are actually the opposite of that. And you kind of you touched on so many different things, but I think the one trait that I'm hearing is, you just saying, I can't do the same thing day in and day out. I need that variety. And I think that business owners, once they recognize that they really are looking at having their hands in everything. And it really comes down to that core of like, hey, I need a new challenge every day. I need a new growth. And everything that you talked about along the way was that growth mindset of, hey, I didn't know sales, so I took these courses and I watched myself excruciatingly blow it. But it forced you to get better
Yeah.
because, you're staring at it right at the recording going, okay, well, yeah, why did I say that? Well, let's not ever say that again. Or actually, that was good. They responded positively to that. We need to start doing that or whatever. So those were some very, really key areas that I think really led to the recipe to kind of get you to where you're at today. And I think that's really cool. And you've also said that financial thinking is one of the biggest blocks to freedom. Can you talk about that moment that shifted your own kind of money mindset there?
There, so that was kind of a long, slow process, right? Because we all grow up and the school system, I don't think does a very good job of this. I mean, people graduate, they don't even know how to balance a checkbook. If people understood even, I mean, number one, the simplest thing to just being financially secure is spend much less money than you make. And I don't think most people get that point, right? We're a nation in a world in debt. And, as of the time of this recording, we're over 36 trillion in debt. And that's just the government. The government says that in 6 years, by their own numbers, Social Security will be broke. So the deficit's only going to get worse. And it doesn't matter. This isn't a Republican or a Democrat thing. Neither side is doing anything to change it. They both spend money, they spend it different ways. And at some point, it's no different than a household budget. And so I started, years ago, I mean, I don't know, I really started reading books and thinking about this probably 20 plus years ago. And I could see where it was going then when the debt was a fraction of what it is now, right? And I didn't have a good solution. The best solution was gold, and I'd started investing a little bit of money in some gold stocks and gold miners and some things like that. But I really didn't have anything. We're taking a complete left turn now, but I found Bitcoin 8, 9 years ago became like at first it was just this interesting money the government couldn't control. And I was, but I was busy. I was running a business. And then in that we went through COVID, which we by the way, in getting from 0 to 35, I hand waved over it. We did a lot of things wrong and made mistakes and figured like we did a lot of figuring out what didn't work to get to where we are also. And so I was busy with the day to day running the business. And at one point we were opening all these corporate stores and trying to train people. But I just kept over years, I just kept reading a little more about Bitcoin, talking to people, listening to podcasts. And the more I learned, the more I became engrossed into it and think that it's the solution to money printing, the debt, and it's really the way that people again there's a lot of information between the beginning and how I got there, but it really is to me the life raft for people that want to secure their financial future. And it started out with me putting like 1% of my net worth into it, and now I have an irresponsible percentage of my net worth in it.
Well, hey, you talked about your poker
Yeah.
days, so I think a gambler at heart, I don't blame you for that. But you talk about in your upcoming book, Demystifying Money, different concepts that you think most people get wrong. Is that maybe one of them, or do you want to expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, the book talks most. So by the way, the book is, I think money bores most people. Okay. It is. And what's ironic about that is if you think about it, think about how much time people do things for money in their life and how money controls people's lives. I mean, some people live where they live because of money. Either that's where they can afford to live, or that's where they got a job offer and they moved across the country away from their family, really for money, right? And people take the vacations they do and live in the house and drive the car they can. It impacts what school their kids go to. It impacts what food they eat, right? And like money has a really, really big impact on people's lives. And people are kind of aware of that, but yet they don't know anything about it. If you ask people what is money, most people can't answer that. And if you and when you talk about when like probably earlier when I said we're 36 trillion in debt and growing, most people that just goes over their head and they're like, yeah, I don't even understand what a billion is. So how am I supposed to understand a trillion? And that's not my problem. I have, my kid's sick and I got to take my other kid to practice. And then I've got to get to work and I've got to do this and I've got to cook dinner. And they're busy with life and they're just overwhelmed. And they're like, I don't need to spend a bunch of time on this, right? So money has this big impact on our lives, yet at the same time, nobody knows anything about it. So I wrote the book. The first 2/3 of the book is just identifying the problem and how we got here and understanding the background, and then I go into the solution. But I also wrote it as a piece of fiction. So instead of writing a nonfiction boring, I wrote it as a story that takes people through with the characters. So they're reading a story that, hopefully is entertaining the reader so they're not bored out of their minds. And then simultaneously, they're learning some key concepts about money along the
I
way.
think that's really interesting. And that's kind of where I was like seeing a link as well. And you talked about people not understanding money. Do you think that's why a lot of business owners struggle with financial planning? Because I look in and there are some people that kill it. They knock it out of the park. They're all over everything financially. And then, but I don't feel like there's ever that in between. It's either one or the other. You either get it or you don't. What do you think are a few simple but like powerful steps that they can take to better handle their own numbers?
Boy, I think most business owners should hire a bookkeeper, right? Now, if they're the one that you're talking about, where they're on top of it and they're in there and they're really in their books and know their numbers, they don't need to do that. But most business owners, that's not what they do. they start a cabinet business because they want to sell cabinets, or they start a painting business because they want to paint, or they become a lawyer because they want to practice law. If they wanted to be a bookkeeper, they would have started a bookkeeping business, right? But they don't want to do that. And again, it doesn't matter if it's a cabinet business, a lawyer, or what it is. I mean, it could be a dog walker. They have to know their numbers. They got to be able to collect money. You've got to make sure you pay your taxes, right? Because if you don't pay your taxes, the guys and gals that make the laws, that also have the guns and also control the cages, will come put you in the cages, right? And so there's a lot of little things. And then like I'm pretty good at that stuff. And even there's so many government regulations and so much crap that I remember one time I got this thing from the state of Texas saying, you haven't paid your property tax. I'm like, property tax? I rent. Property tax is part of my rent at my location. And I talked to my landlord. They're like, yeah, they're crazy. You don't owe anything. This went on for like 2 years. And finally, I was talking to a woman and she goes, no, you don't understand. This is personal property tax. And I'm like, I don't even know what you're talking about. And she goes, like, are you sitting in a chair right now? I go, yes. Are you looking at a computer? Yes. She goes, you have to pay an annual tax on all that stuff. Your personal property. A lot of states don't have this, but Texas does. And so I'm like, oh, I didn't know that was a thing. So now I've got a couple of years of taxes, and I've got late fees and penalties and legal, like I've got all this, it cost me thousands of dollars to clean up a little bit of tax because I literally didn't even know this is a thing. So I think whether it's bookkeeping or it's that stuff, I think most business owners are really wise to outsource that stuff and put it in somebody's hands. Like once, even me who was pretty good at it, I hired somebody else to take care of it because I could better spend my time selling the next deal, right? Or servicing a customer or getting a review from the people we sold last week or last month. All of those things were better uses of my time, and being able to, outsource that to an expert really made my life a lot easier. So I think with money, some of it is like you've got to know your numbers, and I think people underestimate cash flow. They don't, they look at profit, but if they can't collect the money in the future, they might not be able to stay in business if the cash flow isn't good enough. And I can't tell you how many business owners I've worked with that they're paying credit card interest, or they're just, again, they don't pay their taxes. So all of a sudden, instead of paying a $3,000, I'm just, for example, sales tax bill, the next thing you know, they're paying this for years, and they're paying interest and penalties and legal fees and all that crap. And that's just, it's hard to run a business that way, and it's distracting.
Yeah, we've seen that. We've seen that. And I think that's such good advice. So let's talk about some other common traps. Like what do you think are other financial mistakes that you see entrepreneurs make like over and over again like that?
Boy, I look at our dealers. One of the most common things is they don't spend enough money on our marketing, and they don't spend enough money on advertising, right? And it's like cutting off their nose to spite their face. And they're like, well, I'm not making enough money, so I'm going to cut advertising. I'm like, it's the last thing you cut. That produces revenue, right? Like you have to, the phone's got to be ringing, or people got to be walking through your door, or filling out forms, or however they contact you. Like you have to have a plan for that, and it has to be enough to keep your business going. And I've I have lost track of how many people I've had this conversation with. And even, COVID was really rough for us. And I know a lot of trades I've got some friends in the trades that did extremely well. I've got a good friend here in town that was in the window business, that when COVID came, he saw it as an opportunity, and he doubled down and he grew like crazy through it. Kitchens, though, a lot of people didn't want to tear their kitchen apart when you couldn't go out to eat. And they go on the internet and they read, oh my God, my kitchen was tore apart for a month. And they couldn't imagine doing that during COVID, right? So we struggled. And for us, we had just opened 4 corporate stores not too long before that, and getting employees to work in those corporate stores because everybody's saying don't work. So now we've got 4 new leases. We got all multiple employees per store that we're trying to pay. We still got to pay internet and electricity and all that stuff. So it was rough for us that way because their volume dropped. But even a lot of our independent dealers, a lot of them just took that as like they were scared, and they cut advertising and they went. But we had dealers, I had two or three dealers that did similar to my friend in the window business. They like thought, okay, everybody else is scared, I'm going to be aggressive, and they went for it, and they grew during COVID, despite, I mean, it was a real thing that people didn't necessarily want to rip apart their kitchen, but there was also opportunity because a lot of the competition was scared. And, it differed also by territory. Here in Austin, you know, a cabinet business wasn't allowed to be open, right? Um, you know, my local guy at that time, I'd sold the business, but he had 6,000 square feet. Like, he wasn't allowed to have one customer in there one on one, and a Home Depot half a mile away was jam packed wall to wall people, right? Um, Frankly, I'm defiant enough, I would have just stayed open and made him come arrest me probably, or I don't know that I'd advise that to other people, but he wasn't willing to do that. And
Sure.
so many people just cut their marketing versus the people that,
Yeah.
and I'm not saying that's always the answer, right? There's a point. I mean, you don't want to throw good money after bad, but I really watched the people that were aggressive there and doubled down on their marketing, whether it was in my company or outside, did very, very well during COVID. And the
Yeah.
ones that were scared and went away, it's just gonna be really, if you're gonna cut marketing, you better replace it with something. You better be networking, stopping by job sites, joining clubs. You better be doing something else to generate that because I don't know, there's really a business out there that if you can't generate traffic and lead flow that is going to survive or certainly not thrive.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Those are really good points. And I want to take you to our signature question because you've covered some really, really great things about what it took for you to get there, what you've seen it takes for other people as well. But in your experience, tell us about what it takes to sit at that seat, to be that business owner in this day and age.
So, boy, there's a lot of ways I could go with this question. I think it starts with the right mindset and the attitude. And, it's funny, when I was younger, I used to just think everybody should be an entrepreneur. And I used to just, like my kids, I'm like, everybody should be an entrepreneur. And now I actually feel differently. I'm more likely to tell people you should only be an entrepreneur if you have to. And they look at me and they're like, I don't know what you mean. And I'm like, I'm not really built for working for somebody else. I would rather make less money, work longer hours, even if I have to, be my own boss and control my own future. And if you're not, in a lot of ways, being an entrepreneur can be hard. I mean, during COVID when we weren't making money and I had to, unload like savings and not buy things and sell things and not pay myself so I could pay everybody else and make payroll is, if you're not built for that, you probably shouldn't do it. So I think it starts with, are you really an entrepreneur? And I don't think that means you're a risk taker necessarily. I think a lot of entrepreneurs start out and they really have well thought out business plans and I don't think it means this big risk thing that a lot of people do. But then you better be willing to invest in the business and yourself because you have to grow, and if there's a skill that you don't have, you better develop it or hire it from somebody else, or whether it's an outside like a bookkeeper we talked about, or it's hiring somebody that has the opposite skill set to work with you. Okay. um, and but also sometimes it means you have to spend money on advertising, and sometimes you spend money on marketing and it doesn't work, or you spend money on a new piece of software or whatever it is and it doesn't work. That's okay, right? But you gotta, you have, you're not gonna grow if you don't try some of those things.
Yeah, find one that does, right? Keep on going. I like all those points, and I think um, you kind of touched on some really big ones, some common things that we see that are really good, formulas for success, and that's definitely, surrounding yourself with people who can hold you accountable to doing some of those things and to kind of teach you in the areas that you may have some gaps, and that's where we talked about the bookkeeper and all that kind of stuff, and also, thinking about the future always. always investing in marketing, investing in things that are going to feed you down the line, and that are going to drive growth or sales your way, because that's how you stay open. And then that longevity of really doing what it takes, really, to make ends meet, even if it means, hey, I don't get paid,
Right.
this time, and I have to work more than everyone else this time, and I have to move things. I have to do things that are not easy, things that I don't even necessarily want to do because it just has to get done. And
Right.
so, Randy, thank you so much for coming in. If listeners, if you're trying to find, either demystifying money, if you want to check out his upcoming book, or even just connect with, you're thinking of doing your own cabinets one day, Randy, where can they find you?
Well, anything cabinet related, premiumcabinets.com. And we're looking for dealers, people that are entrepreneurial that want to start their own business. So really, we're probably looking for that more than we are customers in a lot of ways right now. But again, if somebody wants to do their kitchen, they can find the dealer closest to them. If they're looking for that, uh, I have a podcast of my own called Tales of Abundance. They can find us wherever podcasts are. And by the time this airs, we are putting the final touches on the book. By the time this airs, the book will easily be out. Called Demystifying Money. So any and all the above would be immensely appreciated.
Awesome, Randy. Thanks again for joining us. And thank you for listening to What It Takes. Until next time, keep going, keep growing, and keep believing in what's possible. We'll see ya.
Thank you, Jamie. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks. Would you or someone you know like to be featured on this podcast? Our applications are now open. Apply today at seekersolution.com and click on the podcast link to get started.